Welcome everyone. This course offers a condensed introduction to Marxist political economy. This course is created by the Academy of Finland funded project Assembling Post-Capitalist International Political Economy located at Tampere University in Finland. I am Mikko Poutanen, a postdoctoral researcher in political science, and the main points of this lecture will be also visible on the screen as I talk, so feel free also to pause and go back if something is unclear. There will also be a list of useful links at the end of the lecture. So let's begin with the foundational works of Karl Marx on political economy, which are the 3 volumes of Capital, with the first volume published in 1867. The Grundrisse is also relevant here because it is the first and more expansive draft of the Capital volumes. Only volume 1 was completed by Marx in his lifetime. Volumes 2 and 3 were compiled by his co-author and friend Friedrich Engels after Marx's death. The Communist Manifesto is one of Marx's more recognized titles, but it is not really an academic work on political economy. Marx's writing is sometimes hard and dense to follow, so it is okay to use supporting materials. Here I recommend using, for example, David Harvey's website in particular. Harvey has introductory lectures that go deeper into the volumes of Capital on his website, and he also has authored 2 companion books on Capital. Both of Harvey's excellent companion books are likely available in your university library. Also consider forming a study or reading group to read and discuss the works if you want to delve deeper into the topic. Marxist political economy is considered largely a reaction to the dominant liberal political economy in its time. Marxist political economy serves as heterodoxy to the orthodoxy of the liberal tradition of political economy. This is why the first volume of Capital is subtitled Critique of Political Economy. Marxist theory is dominantly materialist, that is, material conditions of man constitute everything else in society, including man's consciousness. Thus, the capitalist mode of production becomes an element of material life conditions and processes of social, political, and intellectual life in general. Historically speaking, capitalism is but one mode of societal production, but it was the dominant one in Marx's day and still today. For Marxist political economy, another key term is commodity. Commodities are produced by human labor and turned into products to be sold, which also expands beyond just products. According to Marx, social relations under capitalism are determined by the value of the commodity exchange. Turning societal relations into relations of commodities to be exchanged is known in Marxist theory as commodity fetishism. This is not the fun kind of fetishism, but basically treating people as things, as the products they themselves produce. This leads to dissatisfaction and alienation within and between people. Commodified labor is expendable and interchangeable, in a word, dehumanizing. Since the focus of capitalism is on exchange and gaining materially through exchange, capitalist assumptions of competition encourages viewing everything through the lens of utilitarian or instrumental value. People seek to maximize their own utility surrounded not by other people, but by things. This is exactly what Marxist political economy critiques because it enables exploitation. In a capitalist society, capitalists accumulate capital from labor through exploiting their labor by paying less for it than they extract in the exchange of the products created. This sets the basic agents of a societal class struggle between the capitalists and the working class. The dominant class in any historical era gets to set the socio-political agenda. The class struggle involving the exploitation of labor by capital within the capitalist mode of production is fundamental to the understanding of dynamics within Marxist political economy. The main antagonists are capital and labor, with the prior characterized by ownership of the means of production and the latter by labor power. Under capitalist conditions, labor is not only exploited but also faces alienation. This means that the wage laborers are not the directors of their own work. Instead, the laborer is commodified, i.e. turned into the commodity, like the products they themselves create. In exchange for wages, the laborer loses or cedes control over the circumstances, terms, and conditions of their work. In short, capitalism also creates a labor market where the laborer is relatively disempowered in terms of negotiating power, always at risk of being replaced by the reserve army of the unemployed. Less labor, domestic or international, has negotiating power, the less it can claim its share of the profits. All social relations are transformed into commercial relationships, meaning relationships of exchange and relationships of buying and selling. The so-called market becomes perceived as an objective and naturalized forum of exchange, as if the value of a commodity were independent of the volition and initiatives of the capitalist producers, buyers, and sellers. The capitalist market, according to Marx, reinforces the perception that social forces are equitable with natural forces. Liberal political economy would see nothing wrong with this mechanic buying labor in exchange for wages at their respective values, but Marxist political economy stresses the asymmetry of power with the relationship between capital and labor. You will see here how Marxist political economy introduced many concepts common in current political discourse, such as ideology, hegemony, class, and so on. This is a social, political, and historical construct. For Marx, capitalism is by default based on hierarchies of class, which are masked by favorable ideology. Ideology explains how subordinate classes accept their position. Capitalist power structures seek to naturalize that asymmetry in societal structures of power. Relations of production define social production within a capitalist hierarchy. There are very real hierarchies of power in play here, in terms of access to capital and thus access to opportunities in life. Marx was willing to accept that individual capitalists are rational and act as much as they can in a rational and even moral way, but the system in itself is irrational, and it produces irrational and even more so immoral effects in its quest for profit. Marxist conception of capitalist ideology entails subordination without direct coercion. Class consciousness is necessary to understand societal structures of power. The struggle, as Marx sees it, is between the owners of the means of production and labor, including those displaced from the labor market, meaning the unemployed. Capital seeks to solidify its position and safeguard itself against all other encroachments by, for example, securing property through law. This is why, in Marx's view, revolutions are necessary, not merely reforms, to change the symmetry of power. Marx emphasizes how the markets are the result of human action and interaction, which creates contradictions between human behavior and the so-called laws of the market. Marx proposes his own laws, such as the law of competition in capitalist societies. This means, in short, that in the endemic quest for profit, capitalists will always defect in favor of exploitation rather than cooperation. Marx's other arguments can be summed up in the three primary laws he identified as flaws in the ideology and theory of liberal political economy. The so-called first law of Marxist political economy dictates that the market is in no way prone to stability and arriving at an equilibrium. Quite the opposite. The markets typically create crises of overproduction or overconsumption that can create crises of production in retail or in finance. All parts are so interconnected that small crises may cascade through the system catastrophically. The second law is the accumulation of capital, which means capital gathers in the hands and piles up in the accounts of capitalists. Competition forces capitalists to continuously increase their efficiency and investment or risk extinction. Capital creates momentum in different directions, meaning that it naturally converges, leaving others destitute. Money flows to more money. The third law is the falling rate of profit, which means that there is an endemic overall decrease in return on investment. Indeed, the contradiction is in the desire of capital to reproduce itself. In other words, pay labor as little as possible to produce as many goods as possible. But by paying the working class too little, there is no purchasing power for the goods produced. Increased efficiency creates unemployment and thus poverty, which in turn has the potential to turn into political crises. The second law determines that unbridled capitalism shrinks the middle class in turn. The welfare state is one political solution that has tried to balance the problems caused by these laws by giving labor more negotiating power for wages, which means that they retain more purchasing power. This includes centralized bargaining between employers and laborers. Marx further argues that the economy is not conceived as a neutral platform of exchange and cooperation, but as historical and political constitution primarily characterized by asymmetric power relations, ideology, and social conflicts. The economy is not separate from politics. Economics does not operate independently, but as a mutually constitutive force in society. This relationship and the internal logics of capital are seen as extremely crisis-prone by Marxist political economy. In other words, Marxist political economy assumes that crises are endemic to capitalism as a mode of production and as a societal power structure, and that in the long term, the situation will only increase societal polarization through continuous crises. Marxist political economy has the explicit aim to change the current state of economic and societal organization with an emancipatory perspective to establish a more just society by overcoming capitalism. This is why it is considered both normative and radical when compared to liberal political economy. Here is a suitable quote from Andrew Gamble worth emphasizing. Fundamental to any Marxist analysis is its understanding of the economy, how capital is reproduced, how profitability is maintained, and how crises develop. For Marx, capitalist profit is rooted in the exploitation of labor power, more specifically the wage laborer. Capitalists only pay the workers the wage they need to reproduce their labor power, even if workers generate higher value. This surplus value is then appropriated by capitalists and then reinvested. Surplus value is the difference between wages attributed to labor and the profits accumulated by the capitalist. So it is by default extracted from labor. Surplus value is then reinvested by capitalists to expand the cycle of money, commodity, money, or MCM. Capital depends on this cycle to survive and must extract it to reproduce the chain of money creating more money against other tendencies of the markets to produce profitability. The struggle over the length of the working day is one of the ways of looking at the mechanics of exploitation in capitalism as Marx understood them. For this discussion, you should read chapter 10 of Capital, dealing with the length of the working day. The chapter is linked with the course description. Note that here in Marxist time, workers were paid by the day, not by the hour. As work has become more fragmented, it is harder for the worker to tell the ratio of necessary and surplus labor. But this is still a functional exercise to understand the differentiation of necessary labor and additional labor, which serves as the catalyst of surplus value.